Kai Nakamura kept his head down as he walked through the marble-lined corridors of Westfield Academy, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder. At 17, he stood barely 5'6", with a lean frame that made him appear even smaller among the towering athletes who dominated these halls. His black hair fell across his eyes, a deliberate shield against the stares and whispers that followed him everywhere. 3 weeks. That's how long he'd been at this elite private school. And already he could feel the familiar weight of unwanted attention settling on his shoulders like a heavy coat. The other students moved in expensive clusters, their designer uniforms crisp and perfect, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings with the confidence that only money could buy. Just keep walking, Kai told himself, adjusting his grip on his battered textbooks. Don't make eye contact. Don't give them a reason. But reasons, he'd learned, were rarely necessary for people like Marcus Sterling. Well, look what we have here. The voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade, causing several students to turn and look. Marcus emerged from a group near the lockers, his perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. At 6'2", with the build of someone who'd never missed a day at his personal trainer, he commanded attention without effort. His uniform was tailored to perfection, and the Rolex on his wrist probably cost more than most people's cars. Kai's steps faltered for just a moment before he continued walking, hoping to slip past unnoticed. But Marcus wasn't done. "I said, look what we have here," Marcus repeated, stepping directly into Kai's path. His 2 constant companions flanked him immediately. Tyler Morrison, a red-haired giant with shoulders like a linebacker, and Jake Whitmore, whose perpetual smirk suggested he found cruelty amusing. "The scholarship kid thinks he can just walk past us without saying hello." The hallway began to slow around them, as other students sensed drama brewing. Some stopped to watch openly, while others pretended to organize their lockers while stealing glances. A few teachers were visible in the distance, but they seemed conveniently absorbed in their conversations. Kai raised his eyes slowly, meeting Marcus's gaze with quiet resignation. "Excuse me, I'm just trying to get to class." "Excuse me," Tyler mimicked in an exaggerated accent, causing a ripple of laughter from the growing audience. "Did you hear that, Jake? He's trying to get to class. Maybe we should help him find his way," Jake suggested, his voice dripping with false concern. "He's new here. Probably doesn't understand how things work." Marcus stepped closer, and Kai caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, the smell of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "See, Nakamura, there's something you need to understand about Westfield Academy. There's a hierarchy here, a natural order." Kai said nothing, his dark eyes steady but showing no challenge. Inside, he felt the familiar coiling sensation in his muscles, the automatic response his body had learned over years of training. His breathing slowed. His stance shifted almost imperceptibly. "No," he told himself firmly. "Not here, not yet." "At the top," Marcus continued, gesturing to himself and his friends, "you have people like us. Our families built this place. Our donations keep it running. We belong here." "And at the bottom," Tyler added with a cruel grin, "you have charity cases like you. Here because someone felt sorry for you." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Kai was at Westfield on an academic scholarship, his single mother working double shifts at the hospital just to cover his living expenses. But what they didn't know, what no one at this school knew, was why his family had really moved here from California. "Don't think about the cage," Kai warned himself as memories threatened to surface. "Don't think about the fights. That's not who you are anymore." "So when someone like me is talking to someone like you," Marcus said, reaching out to poke Kai in the chest with one manicured finger, "the polite thing to do is show some respect." Kai took a step back, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous, the instinct to grab that finger and break it in 3 places. "I understand. I'm sorry for any disrespect." The apology seemed to satisfy Marcus momentarily, but Jake wasn't finished. "You know what I think? I think our new friend here needs a proper Westfield welcome." Before Kai could react, Jake grabbed his backpack and yanked it away, spilling books and papers across the pristine marble floor. A calculator bounced and skittered under the nearby lockers. His worn notebook, the one where he kept his thoughts and sketches, flopped open, revealing pages of detailed drawings and Japanese characters. "Oops," Jake said with mock concern. "How clumsy of me." The laughter that erupted from the watching students felt like physical blows. Kai knelt slowly to gather his scattered belongings, his movements careful and controlled. Each book he picked up, each paper he collected, was done with the precise economy of motion that marked someone trained to fight. But the audience saw only submission. "Look at him crawl around like a dog," Tyler observed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe we should get him a collar." Kai's hand paused on his notebook, and for a split second, Marcus caught something in his eyes, a flash of something dark and dangerous that was there and gone so quickly, he almost missed it. Almost. "Did you see that?" Marcus murmured to his friends as Kai continued gathering his things. "For a second there, I thought the little mouse was going to squeak." But the moment passed, and Kai rose with his salvaged belongings, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you for the welcome," he said quietly. "I'll remember it." Something about the way he said those words sent an unexpected chill down Marcus's spine, but he pushed the feeling aside. This was just another weak scholarship kid who needed to learn his place. As Kai walked away, Marcus called after him, "See you around, Nakamura." Real soon, the crowd began to disperse, already moving on to the next piece of gossip. But a few students lingered, watching Kai's retreating figure with something that might have been sympathy, or perhaps curiosity about why someone would take that kind of humiliation without fighting back. What they didn't see was the way Kai's hands clenched into fists once he turned the corner, or how he had to stop in an empty bathroom to control his breathing and calm the rage that threatened to consume him. In the mirror, his reflection looked back, still small, still quiet, still unremarkable. But behind his eyes, something ancient and powerful stirred, something that had been forged in underground rings and backyard fights, tested against opponents twice his size and 3 times as mean. Not yet, he reminded himself again, but soon. The pattern established itself over the following days like a ritual. Marcus and his crew would find Kai in the hallways, the cafeteria, the library, anywhere there was an audience to witness their dominance. Each encounter escalated slightly from the last, testing boundaries and pushing limits. They accidentally knocked his lunch tray to the floor on Tuesday, splattering curry across his uniform shirt and forcing him to spend the rest of the day smelling like turmeric and shame. The cafeteria erupted in laughter as Kai knelt to clean up the mess with paper napkins, his movements still carrying that strange precision that made Marcus's instincts prickle with unease. Wednesday brought a new humiliation in the gymnasium. During the mandatory fitness period, Tyler forgot to check his swing during softball practice, sending a line drive directly at Kai's head. Only reflexes honed by years of dodging real punches saved him from a concussion, but the way he moved, fluid, fast, perfectly balanced, caught the attention of Coach Martinez. "Nice dodge, Nakamura," the coach called out. "You play any sports?" "Not anymore," Kai replied, but his tone carried weight that made the coach study him more carefully. Marcus didn't like the attention. After class, he cornered Kai near the equipment shed, his face flushed with irritation. "You think you're special, don't you? Think you can show off and impress the teachers?" Kai kept his voice level. "I was just trying not to get hit." Maybe next time you won't be so lucky." The threat hung in the air between them like smoke. Thursday's harassment moved beyond school property. Marcus and his crew followed Kai to the bus stop, their expensive cars crawling alongside the sidewalk as they shouted taunts and threw empty energy drink cans. Other students at the stop looked away, unwilling to risk becoming targets themselves. "Hey, Nakamura!" Jake yelled from the passenger seat of Marcus's BMW. "My dad's company is looking for janitors. Want me to put in a good word?" The laughter from the car was like broken glass, sharp and cutting. An elderly woman waiting for the bus shot disapproving looks at the boys, but said nothing. The bus driver, when he arrived, studiously ignored the scene. No one's going to help, Kai realized as he climbed onto the bus amid continued jeers. They're all too afraid or too indifferent, but it was Friday that changed everything. Kai had been looking forward to the weekend, to 2 days away from the constant humiliation and the growing pressure in his chest that felt like a dam about to burst. He'd even allowed himself to hope that maybe Marcus and his friends would get bored and move on to easier targets. He should have known better. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. During lunch period, while most students were in the cafeteria, Marcus approached Kai in the library where he'd been trying to catch up on reading assignments. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, had stepped out for her own lunch break, leaving the space eerily quiet. "Nakamura," Marcus said, his voice unusually friendly. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier this week." Kai looked up from his textbook, immediately alert. Experience had taught him that Marcus at his most pleasant was Marcus at his most dangerous. "I realized I may have been too harsh," Marcus continued, settling into the chair across from Kai with the casual confidence of someone who owned the world. "You're new here, you don't understand how things work yet." Tyler and Jake emerged from behind the stacks, cutting off any potential escape routes. Jake was carrying something in his hands, a laptop bag that Kai recognized with growing dread. "So we thought we'd help you understand," Marcus said, nodding to Jake. Jake set the laptop bag on the table and unzipped it, revealing Kai's personal laptop, a battered but functional machine that his mother had saved for months to buy him. But it wasn't the computer that made Kai's blood turn to ice, it was what was attached to it. "Interesting thing about scholarship students," Marcus said conversationally, as Jake held up a small plastic bag filled with white powder. "So much pressure to succeed. Sometimes they turn to performance enhancers to keep up with the competition." Kai's mouth went dry. "That's not mine." "Of course it's not," Marcus agreed, "but who's going to believe that? Poor kid from the wrong side of town, desperate to fit in at an elite school. Classic story, really." The beautiful cruelty of it hit Kai like a physical blow. His laptop, his lifeline to the outside world, and his connection to the underground fighting community he'd left behind, had been turned into evidence of his supposed drug use. Even if he could prove the drugs weren't his, the suspicion would follow him forever. "What do you want?" Kai asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. "I want you to understand your place. I want you to stop pretending you belong here, and I want you to disappear. You can't make me leave." "Can't I?" Marcus gestured to the laptop and planted evidence. "One anonymous tip to the administration, one search of your locker, which coincidentally will turn up more of the same. Game over." Tyler cracked his knuckles loudly. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer we handle this a different way." The threat was clear. Kai could take a beating now and hope they'd be satisfied, or face expulsion and criminal charges later. Either way, his future would be destroyed. For a long moment, the library was silent except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of normal students living normal lives. Kai stared at his laptop, at the evidence of how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered, and felt something inside him finally crack. 3 years, he thought. 3 years since the last time I threw a real punch. 3 years of walking away, of being the bigger person, of proving I was more than just a fighter. But what had it gotten him? His mother still worked herself to exhaustion. They still lived paycheck to paycheck. And now, when he'd finally found a chance at something better, these privileged predators wanted to take it away, just because they could. "Well," Marcus prompted, "what's it gonna be, Nakamura?" Kai looked up, and something in his expression made Tyler take an involuntary step backward. The quiet, submissive scholarship student was gone, replaced by something else entirely. "You made one mistake," Kai said, his voice carrying a new edge that cut through the silence like a blade. "Oh, really?" Marcus laughed, but the sound was forced. "And what's that?" Kai stood slowly, his movements fluid and controlled in a way that suddenly reminded Marcus of a predator rising from stillness. "You should have checked to see if anyone was recording this conversation." He pulled out his phone, its camera app clearly visible and actively recording. The red dot indicating live recording pulsed like a heartbeat. "Smile," Kai said softly. "You're about to be famous." Marcus lunged for the phone, but Kai was already moving. Years of dodging punches from opponents who outweighed him by 60 pounds had taught him to read attacks before they began. He sidestepped Marcus's clumsy grab with minimal effort, maintaining his grip on the phone. "Give me that!" Tyler charged forward with all the subtlety of a freight train. Kai didn't think. 3 years of suppressed instinct took over, and his body responded with muscle memory forged in 100 underground fights. He ducked under Tyler's swinging arm, pivoted on his back foot, and drove his elbow upward into the bigger boy's solar plexus with surgical precision. Tyler folded like a cheap umbrella, gasping and clutching his chest as he stumbled backward into a bookshelf. The crash of falling volumes echoed through the library like thunder. "What the?" Jake started forward, but stopped dead when he saw the way Kai was looking at him. Gone was the quiet transfer student who'd endured weeks of humiliation without protest. In his place stood someone else entirely, someone whose stance spoke of countless hours in training gyms and whose eyes held the cold calculation of a fighter who'd learned to survive against impossible odds. "You want to know who I really am?" Kai asked, his voice carrying deadly calm. "I'm Kai Nakamura, 3-time junior champion of the West Coast Underground Fighting Circuit. Undefeated in 37 matches. Marcus's face went white. "You're lying. Ask anyone from California. Ask them about the kid they called the Shadow because he was too fast to see coming." Kai's phone continued recording as he spoke, capturing everything. "Ask them about the night I took down Tommy, the Tank Rodriguez, 6'8", 260 pounds of pure muscle. Ask them why I retired at 14. The truth was darker than any of them could imagine. Kai had been forced to fight to keep his family fed after his father disappeared, leaving them with nothing but debt and broken promises. The underground circuit had been brutal but profitable, and his natural talent had made him a legend among people who measured worth in blood and victory. But the night he'd nearly killed Tommy Rodriguez, the night he'd seen the fear in his opponent's eyes and realized he was becoming something monstrous, he'd walked away. His mother had gotten her nursing degree, they'd moved across the country, and Kai had sworn never to fight again. Until now. "I left that world behind," Kai continued, circling slowly as Marcus and Jake backed toward the wall. Tyler was still gasping on the floor, his face red as he struggled to breathe. "I came here to be normal, to be just another student trying to get an education." Marcus found his voice, but it cracked with uncertainty. "You can't threaten us, our families. We'll do what exactly?" Kai interrupted. "When this video goes viral? When everyone sees what kind of people you really are?" He held up the phone, its camera still focused on their pale faces. "You planted drugs on a scholarship student. You threatened to frame him for dealing. How do you think that's going to play in the media?" The reality of their situation began to sink in. Marcus's father was a prominent businessman whose company depended on public image. Tyler's family ran a charity foundation that would collapse under scandal. Jake's mother was running for city council. One viral video could destroy everything they'd inherited. "Delete it," Marcus demanded, but his voice held no authority now. "Delete the video and we'll call it even." Kai laughed, and the sound held no warmth. "Even? You think we're even?" He moved closer, and despite having a significant size advantage, the three bullies pressed back against the wall. There was something in Kai's movements now, a predatory grace that spoke of dangerous capability. "You've spent 3 weeks making my life hell," Kai said softly. 3 weeks of humiliation, harassment, and threats. You planted drugs in my bag. You tried to destroy my future. And you think we can call it even? "What do you want?" Jake whispered. Kai stopped just outside striking distance, close enough that they could see the steel in his dark eyes. "I want you to understand something. I chose not to fight back, not because I was weak, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what I was capable of." He gestured to Tyler, who was finally managing to breathe normally, but was still clutching his ribs. "That was me holding back 90%. That was me being gentle." Marcus swallowed hard. We didn't know." "No, you didn't." Kai's voice carried the weight of years spent fighting for survival. "You saw what you wanted to see. A quiet kid you could push around. Someone beneath you." He pulled up his phone's gallery and showed them a photo. Himself at 14, standing in a fighting ring surrounded by cheering crowds. His opponent unconscious at his feet. His face in the picture was cold and empty, the expression of someone who'd learned to turn off his conscience to survive. "This is who I used to be," he said quietly. "This is what I walked away from. Not because I lost, I never lost, but because I realized I was becoming someone I didn't want to be." Marcus stared at the photo, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. "We're sorry. We didn't mean—" "You did mean it," Kai cut him off. "Every humiliation, every threat, every moment you made me feel small and powerless, you meant all of it." He pocketed the phone and stepped back, giving them room to breathe. "But here's what's going to happen next. You're going to leave me alone, all of you. You're going to tell your friends to leave me alone. And if I ever catch you bullying another student, this video goes public." "That's it?" Tyler croaked from the floor. "You're not going to—" "Fight you," Kai finished. "Beat you into paste. Prove how tough I am." He shook his head. "That's the old me. The one I left behind. The new me. The new me believes in consequences that matter." He began gathering his things, including his laptop and the planted drugs, which he disposed of in a nearby trash can. "You want to know the difference between us? When you had power over me, you used it to cause pain. Now that I have power over you, I'm choosing to be better." Marcus found his voice as Kai headed for the library exit. "This isn't over." Kai paused in the doorway and looked back. For just a moment his mask slipped, and they saw the fighter he'd been, cold, calculating, absolutely lethal. "Yes," he said quietly, "it is." The next Monday brought changes that rippled through Westfield Academy like a stone thrown into still water. Marcus and his crew were noticeably absent from their usual hunting grounds, and when they did appear, they kept their distance from everyone, not just Kai. Word spread through the student body the way rumors always did in closed environments, quickly, gaining embellishment with each retelling. Some said the quiet transfer student had hospitalized Tyler with a single punch. Others claimed he was connected to organized crime. A few swore they'd seen security footage of him moving like something out of an action movie. The truth, as it often does, was both simpler and more complex than the stories. Kai returned to his routine of keeping his head down and avoiding attention, but there was a difference now. His shoulders were straighter. His steps were more confident. When other students looked at him, they saw someone who'd earned his place rather than someone who'd been lucky enough to receive charity. The real change, however, was in how others behaved around him. Sarah Kim, a quiet sophomore who'd been one of Marcus's previous targets, worked up the courage to sit at Kai's table during lunch. "Thank you," she said simply, not elaborating on what she was thanking him for. Within days, others joined them. Students who'd been on the periphery, the overlooked and undervalued, who recognized something in Kai that they wanted to be part of. Not his fighting ability, but his willingness to stand up when it mattered. Coach Martinez approached him after gym class on Wednesday. "You ever think about joining the wrestling team?" "I don't compete anymore," Kai replied, but there was less finality in his voice than before. "Maybe not yet," the coach said, "but if you change your mind, the offer stands. We could use someone who knows how to teach others to stand up for themselves." The conversation with his mother that Friday evening was one of the hardest of his life. Sitting in their small apartment, he told her about the bullying, the planted drugs, and his response. He expected anger, disappointment, maybe even fear that he was sliding back into his old life. Instead, she pulled him into a hug that lasted several minutes. "I was wondering when you'd remember who you really are," she said softly. "Not the fighter, the person who protects others." "I hurt someone, Mom. I used my skills to defend yourself and prevent injustice," she interrupted. "There's a difference between fighting for money and fighting for principle. You're finally old enough to understand that difference." The final confrontation came 2 weeks later in the form of an unexpected encounter in the parking lot after school. Marcus approached alone, his usual swagger replaced by something that might have been humility. "I wanted to apologize," he said without preamble, "for everything." Kai studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception or another trap. "Why?" "Because you were right about consequences that matter." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger and more uncertain. "My father saw the video. Someone sent it to him anonymously." "I kept my word," Kai said. "I didn't make it public." "I know, but he still saw it. He wanted to know how his son had become the kind of person who would plant drugs on another student." Marcus's voice was heavy with shame. It was the most disappointed I've ever seen him. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two teenagers trying to navigate territory neither had explored before. "I don't expect forgiveness," Marcus continued. "I just wanted you to know that you changed something. Not just in me, but in how I see things, how I treat people." Kai nodded slowly. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were, including you." The question caught Kai off guard. "What do you mean?" "Coach Martinez told me about the wrestling team offer. Sarah Kim mentioned you've been helping her with confidence training." Marcus managed a small smile. "Maybe it's time to stop running from who you are and start becoming who you're supposed to be." As Marcus walked away, Kai stood alone in the parking lot, processing the conversation. Around him, other students headed home to families and lives that had never required them to fight for survival or walk away from everything they were good at. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the real victory wasn't in proving he could destroy his enemies, but in choosing not to. Maybe strength wasn't about how hard you could hit, but about knowing when not to swing. The following Monday, Kai walked into Coach Martinez's office and signed up for the wrestling team. Not to relive his past, but to build something new, something better. And for the first time since arriving at Westfield Academy, he felt like he truly belonged. The transformation wasn't complete. Real change never happened overnight. But it was begun, rooted in the understanding that sometimes The greatest victory came not from fighting, but from choosing when the fight was worth having. In the end, the bullies had been right about one thing. They had chosen the wrong person to target. Not because Kai was unstoppable, but because he was unbreakable, and sometimes that made all the difference.